Thanks for joining me today. This is Linda Glassmoyer, independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, and today I'm going to show you a card that is based on one of the layouts in my 25 greeting card layouts collection, Volume 1. We're going to be working with template number 22 today. The templates generally have the basic cutting size and scoring sizes in them. And this template is available complimentary, but if you want the whole collection, you're welcome to download that as well. You can use it digitally or print the pages out and then bind it however you want, which is what I personally find the easiest to do. Stamp sets we'll be using today are Soaring Swallows and Mini Mates. The embossing folder is called Painted Texture. It is a 3D folder. We're also using Tasteful Labels dies and the Swallows dies. Now the Swallows dies, along with its coordinating stamp set, the Soaring Swallows, is available in the current mini catalog, which is the January through June 2022 mini catalog. It's available now. This is a monochromatic card. I'm working with Misty Moonlight and Balmy Blue. And some of the other tools that we'll be using are the, blending brush, the Stamparatus, and I'll actually end up using both the mini as well as the full standard sizes of the Stampin' Cut and Emboss machines. I've already gone ahead and cut the card base pieces per the instructions in the template, but I'm actually going to be stamping on a cardstock panel that is not included in that template because it's a variation of the template that I've chosen to do. Now the stamp set Soaring Swallows is a distinctive set as well as a two-step, and I'm inking up one of the background pieces from it with Balmy Blue. You'll notice as I move along here that you do have that texture effect with the lights and darks, and that's one of the beauties of the distinctive stamp sets. I'm going to place that right on top of the front panel of the card base, and I'll be using my favorite adhesive, which is the Tombow liquid glue. It works best if you store it upside down, so I do have a little container off camera there that I pulled it from, and I usually keep it covered, of course, and with its tip pointing downwards. Keyword there is usually, because sometimes I forget to put it back. Okay, I'm now taking, using the same color, Balmy Blue, and this is a stamp that's available in that same main stamp set that we're using. And I'm just using a 1, 2, 3 generational effect here so that you'll see that I turn this different directions so I don't end up with an obvious pattern. But basically that is the card base ready to begin working with our focal points now. And again, I've used the same color for the Balmy Blue is the same color that I've used for both sections. Now you'll see that in the template it does suggest a 5.5 by 1 inch piece of designer series paper or cardstock over on that right hand panel. I did not do that in this case because I decided to stamp rather than using another layer of cardstock on that section. I'm going to use the largest labels die from the Tasteful Labels dies set. And I'm actually going to make 2 of those. I'm going to place them right there in the center, ultimately. I am using balmy blue cardstock for this. And this piece is narrow enough that I was able to use the mini Stamp and Cut and Emboss machine. I am using Post-it tape. I don't know if this is still available. I bought a roll of it a very, very long time ago in a stationery store, and I love, love, love it, but I haven't seen it anywhere since. So if it's still available, go grab yourself some. It's really a fabulous idea and very helpful for this kind of project. Now I'm actually going to make 2 of those labels identical to each other. You'll see me peeling off that tape there, and we'll see what we've got. There's the first one, and through the magic of television, there's the second one. Now you'll notice that I store my dies on a sheet of black magnetic card, and I trace around each one of the dies, or most of the dies, with the white Stampin' Up! Chalk marker. And that allows me to know when I might be missing something, or in the case of some of the dies sets, there are so many dies in there that it could take you 3 hours to figure out how to get them all to fit. So once you figure it out, you just trace around them, and no more puzzle mystery after that. All right, I'm going to take the embossing folder again. This is the Painted Texture 3D embossing folder. It's wide enough. I'm going to have to go through the standard size Stamp and Cut and Emboss machine, which is off camera. So I'll go do that right now. Poof, through the magic of television. We're done with that. And I'm going to remove those 2, and they already have their texture on them. I just love this particular embossing folder. I find it very practical for all kinds of stuff. Ultimately, these 2 are going to go back to back on my finished card. Next thing I'm going to do is pick up my balmy blue again, which is the lighter of the 2 shades of blue that I'm using on this project. And my blue, or the blending brush that I have designated as my blue brush. And I start off the paper and then move on up to my paper. So notice every time I hit that, I start on my scrap paper and move in circles up onto my actual paper that I'm working with, the die cut piece. And the reason for that is when you first hit the paper, it's going to make a dark spot, and you'd rather have that on your scrap paper than on your finished piece. It's kind of hard to tell. I have a very bright light overhead, but that is, you can see that there is some shading around the edge of the left-hand one. And of course, I will at that point do exactly the same thing for the right-hand one. Now I'm going to pull out my Stamparatus. My Stamparatus is probably one of my very, very favorite tools in our entire collection, because I'm kind of a stickler about getting things straight. Some of you may know that about me. Anyway, I keep using the same piece of paper over and over again. Mine gets really, really messy, but as you can see, I have actually physically taped down the Stamparatus grid paper so that it does not move around. I've also made bumpers of cardstock over on the left and across the bottom there. Those are physically glued in place on that piece of paper so they will not move, and they allow me to take my piece of paper that I'm going to stamp onto and set it exactly where I want it to be. And I can remove it at a later time and put it back exactly where it was, because those bumpers won't move, those bumper strips. Again, I'm using some of that Post-it tape just to help keep that in place so nothing shifts. I'm now going to use the Misty Moonlight blue. It's the darker shade of the 2 shades of blue that I'm using, and ink up the outline images. Now these images are, I think I mentioned, they're a 2-step. And so I just want to make sure that everything's going to work. I noticed that I have to move my magnets a little bit there in order for that to sit down. I like to use the heel of my fist. That's a lot less strenuous on our wrists, and for those of us who've been stamping for 26 years now and getting older every year, we got to take care of our joints. So what I was doing there is checking to make sure that I had good detail everywhere, but I found a section that had not printed well, so I just went back and pressed down on that again to get that ink to transfer. Now I'm removing that wing, and I'm going to bring in the next one that I have already placed the solid color images onto. I've already done the alignment in advance. You don't want to watch me do that. And now I'm going to ink that with the lighter shade, which is the balmy blue. And because these images are solid images, I'm going to take a few extra moments just to make sure that I have good coverage everywhere and I don't accidentally have a line where like the edge of the ink pad might hit and cause a line or something. So I'm going to fuss around here for just a little bit and make sure that everything is really well inked and that it's very, very smooth. You can see that as you look at it. And you'd be able to see it too if I had it on camera. Unfortunately. That's life. Okay, so now we're going to go down here. And again, I'm going to apply pressure with the heel of my hand. And then check and see what we've got. Well, not great. I've missed a whole bunch of areas, so I'm going to come in here and really, really focus on that area, on that top bird. Okay, now he's good. And the lower one is missing quite a number of areas too, where the ink did not transfer from the stamp to the paper, but I'm going to give it extra pressure and I'm going to force it to transfer. And there we are. Now it's looking really good. Okay. A tip for you, sometimes when you've put a lot of ink onto a piece of paper, there's the potential for the ink, before it completely dries, there's the potential for it to kind of bleed out into the fibers of the paper and not look really crisp and sharp if you come back a few minutes later and look at it. So in that case, I took mine off camera and hit it with my heat gun just to dry that ink as quickly as possible because I knew I did have quite a lot of ink on there. So I'm going to select the outline dies that I will use to cut these out. And I've already thought through this so that I can put both of these dies on the same piece of paper. And I'm going to anchor these down with the sticky side there of a Post-it note. Just to show you can use a Post-it tape or a Post-it note. I honestly use Post-it notes because they're easier to obtain, and I usually have one on every surface in my entire house, so they're handy to grab hold of around here. Hold that in place until I can get that anchored down. Now I'm going to put the top layer of the top plate on, and notice I've stepped that back a little bit in the stack. That's just a little hint for making it a little easier for that whole stack to go through the machine, especially on the mini machine. It can kind of argue with you a little bit if you've got all your edges exactly lined up together. Okay, I've got my two birdies, and we'll go back and look at the focal point area again. Now this could be a cluster of images, or it could be a background. In this interpretation on this card, obviously I'm using a background, and I want to put it about in the middle, top to bottom. In other words, vertically have about the same edge spacing there, top to bottom. So I'm going to play around with the positioning a little bit here, and I've decided that I do want it right in the middle. I could have moved it up a little bit higher if I wanted to, but I want it in the middle. So I'm going to put glue just on the left-hand side. If I put glue all the way around it, I would accidentally paste the whole entire card shut, and then I would be an unhappy camper. So I'm just putting glue on the left-hand side, as you can see, and I forgot to put my glue dispenser back in its proper receptacle. All right, I think I've got that positioned about the way I want it. And the beautiful thing about this liquid glue, besides the fact that it is made for paper so it doesn't wrinkle up paper, is that it gives you a few moments to move things around. Unlike our, any kind of adhesive that's in a strip adhesive, once you put it down and it grabs, it's there. So this allows you a few moments of grace that you can position things, slide things around. So now I'm going to put this, mate that right up against the back so that the inside of the card will appear finished as well. That's the inside and that's the outside. And again, you have just a few moments there. You can rearrange things if need be. I'm going to position the location of where I want my birds and use my Misty Moonlight, which is the darker shade of blue, and what is it? I'm drawing a blank on the stamp set name. I'm sorry. Mini Mates? I said it at the beginning. I only need to remember it once, right? Okay, so I'm going to stamp that now onto just a scrap of basic white cardstock. You may notice that I stamped off several times on my scrap paper. That kind of primes the stamp. You get a better image if you stamp, if you ink up the stamp a few times first before you stamp your actual image. Okay. Sending that die through the mini machine. And I actually die cut two of these, one with the sentiment and one without the sentiment. There's obviously the one with the sentiment. And now I'm trying to figure out the placing. Do I want to put it exactly the way that the template suggests, where the sentiment strip runs across the bottom? Or maybe I want that a little bit lower. And ultimately, I do decide that for balance reasons, I like the visual appearance of it positioned a little bit lower, so a little bit below that focal point area. I think this is a little, right there, that seems a little scrunched up to me. So if I move the sentiment down lower, then I have a little more freedom for those birds to be flying around and not quite so scrunched up. So again, I only want glue on the left-hand side of that sentiment. I don't want it on the right-hand side, or I'll glue it to my, glue the card stock. Excuse me, I will glue the card shut. And you may have noticed when I picked it up, see my left, well, did you see where my left thumb was? That was a marker for me to tell me how far over I could go with the glue and don't go past my thumbnail. That's basically what I was doing there. That's what I was thinking. And now I'm going to take the mate to that, which appears, poof, through the magic of television. And it has nothing on it, but I am going to glue it on the inside for a finished look there. Again, that can go all the way, the glue can go through the entire length of that strip. So I'm just positioning it exactly on top of the previous piece. So it's finished on the inside now, and finished on the outside, and it's a little bit sturdier as well. We're getting really close to the end now. The final pieces are going to get positioned, and I'm going to pop those up with Stampin' Dimensionals. See how they look more natural now. They're farther apart, and there's a lot more visual activity going on. So I leave one in place while I pick up the other one, and that will help me reposition in the same orientation as I had my initial layout there. So I used 2 of the larger Stampin' Dimensionals and 2 small ones. And again, I didn't make you watch me take those nasty little papers off the tops. So I still had one on my finger because I usually pick one up on most every finger when I'm doing a project. And I'm going to do 3 large ones and 2 small ones on this particular bird. I'm looking to make sure his right wing there, or his left wing is properly aligned, so I don't accidentally glue the card shut again. Okay. This 25 Greeting Card Layouts Volume 1 is available for download. Some people prefer to use it on their computer, as I mentioned before, or you can punch it and make a booklet out of it, which, as you can see, is my preference. So this will be available at a link that you'll find in the video notes. Thanks for joining me today.